Hey everyone, welcome again to the Winning Digital Customers livecast. Today we are going to be talking about the definitions of some words. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, it's been a while since we've done a livecast based on your questions, and I want to not disregard all the great questions that we get. So I wanted to take today's livecast and specifically answer a question that I've received, and I've actually received it a number of times. And I'll be perfectly honest, I've been a little resistant to covering it on the live cast, and I'll tell you why. But first, let me tell you what the question is. The question is, what is the difference between digital transformation, digitization, and digitalization? Right? What is the difference? And sometimes people would ask me just two of those. I've gotten questions, what is the difference between digital transformation and digitalization? What is the difference between digitization and digitalization? Various versions of that. And because I've received this question so many times, I really wanted to cover it. And the more I thought about covering it, the more excited I got about talking about this. Although I have to confess that when I first started thinking about talking about it, it didn't get me super excited, which is why I delayed so long until enough of you had requested it that I thought I should cover it. The reason why I think I wasn't super enthusiastic about this topic initially was because I thought, words are just words. What really matters for your business is, what do you need to do to be successful? How is the world changing? How are your customers' needs changing? And what kinds of transformation in your business is going to drive your success? And whether you call it one thing or another thing, one could argue, who cares, right? I don't care. I don't care how you use these terms. But having said that, words are important, particularly for collaboration. The way I look at it, these types of words like strategy or branding or roadmap or transformation or digital transformation or digitization, any of these words, they're just labels. They're just labels for different important concepts. And on the one hand, it doesn't necessarily matter that much which label you use. There's nothing inherently good about doing something that is quote unquote innovative, right? If you argue about what the word innovative means and then decide what the word means, and based on that definition, you say, well, we're going to do this thing because based on what we decided the word means, this thing is more innovative. That's a stupid way to make a decision about what to do with your business. No offense. So, you don't want to be driven in terms of what you do to say, well, we must do digital transformation. Now let's figure out what that term means so that we can go do it. That doesn't make any sense. What you need to do is figure out, what do you need to do to be successful? But then it is helpful to have labels for things because they aid communication. If I'm constantly talking about our digital transformation, and when I say that term to you, it means something different than what it means to me, well, then that's going to be an impediment in our communication. I'm saying and I'm picturing one thing and you're picturing something else, and then potentially we'll misunderstand each other. So what I want to offer today is, what do I believe these terms mean? What do I find they commonly mean as I travel? I work with dozens of large companies, so I see these terms in use every day. Not necessarily used 100% consistently, but I'll tell you what I typically find them to mean. And by the way, what's really important is that you mean the same thing within your own organization. If within one organization you use the word digitalization to mean something, and everybody in the organization understands that's what you mean, then that's kind of all that's important, right? Versus at some other company, they might use it to mean something different. Nevertheless, I'm going to give you what I consider my standard definitions. But before I dive into these three terms, which are the heart of our question for today, they share a common word, and that word is the word digital. Digital transformation, digitization, digitalization. And so I thought for a moment it'd be fun to just talk about the word digital, since we're here talking about words today. Now, I don't get questions from people, what does the word digital mean? I think there's at least some degree of common general understanding. In other words, it's not being confused with some other term. Although honestly, there's probably people who would argue slightly different definitions of the word digital. But the origin of the word digital is clear. Digital is used in our world today to talk about things that are computerized in one way, shape, or form, not to put too fine of a point on it. And, of course, what does the word computer mean? It means to do math, right? To work with numbers. Computers fundamentally turn things into numbers. And that doesn't necessarily matter to you if you're someone who uses computers, because very often you don't see the numbers. You go on Internet Explorer or Netscape, what am I saying? Why am I talking about old browsers today? You go on Chrome, you go on Safari, you go to your favorite shopping website, you buy something, and the only number you care about is the price tag. If you're my wife, you don't even care about that. But in fact, the fact that it's digital simply means that everything's been reduced to numbers, which are stored in the back end. And as I say, it may not matter to you, but this is where the term digital comes from, just as a point of interest. And why does the word digital have anything to do with numbers? Well, digit is Latin for fingers. And of course, early math was done on our fingers. I saw my son today working on his addition and subtraction homework at the breakfast table, and he's sitting there, 11 minus 3, 11, 10, 9, 8, right? He's figuring out what 11 minus 3 is. I'd be perfectly honest, when I double-checked his homework, I think there were a couple times I used my fingers as well. So point is, numbers, we start with base 10, counting on our fingers, are digits, and that's what leads to a word such as digit, which refers to, of course, a number, which leads us to a word like digital, which of course refers to stuff that computers do, because computers are based on numbers. And I just think that's interesting, because now when we think about what we do with so many digital devices, it comes back to our fingers. Not because we're counting, but because this motion, right, is the most, if I was to try to give the universal, I don't know American Sign Language, if I was to try to give the universal symbol for digital, it might be this, right? I'm doing something on my phone. So I think that's just curious and interesting, possibly not particularly useful, but anyway, I just thought I'd make that point about the word digital. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about the word digitization. Again, we're going to be making a distinction between three different terms today: digital transformation, digitization, and digitalization. And so we're going to start with digitization because it is the most conceptually simple of the three. What is digitization? It simply means taking something that is not numbers and turning it into numbers, putting it into a computer in some fashion. For example, if you have a check or a document that you've signed and you use an app to scan that check or document, or you use an old-fashioned computer scanner, you're taking something that you've written with your hand or might have been typewritten or printed in some other way, but you don't have it in a computerized form, you have it in a physical form, and you scan it, you've now turned that into ones and zeros. You've turned that into numbers such that it can be put into a file, and that file can be sent somewhere or can be uploaded. Computer can analyze it, calculate how much money the check is for, put the money in your bank account, etc. That's it. If you put your fingerprint on a fingerprint reader for security purposes, your finger, it's kind of ironic example, we're back to fingers, right, is digital in the sense that it is a finger. The Latin people speaking Latin, of which there are none, but would say that this is digital. But for the rest of us, your fingerprint is not digital. It's flesh and blood, right? But when you put it onto a scanner and it scans it, it's been made digital. When an old movie that was on 35 millimeter film is turned into something that they can put on DVD or put on Netflix, it has to be digitized, turned into ones and zeros. When you take a picture with a camera, you're taking something that's in the real world, it's not made of ones and zeros, light beams, which are not made of ones and zeros, and you're turning it into a file. If you take your old records of your company and your old files and you scan them to PDF, you are digitizing. So that's it. Digitization is simply a conversion process. So if anyone wants to know, if someone's arguing that, the launch of your e-commerce platform is an example of digitization, no, it's not. Now, Whether you want to correct them or not, if your CEO is saying that, maybe just let it slide, But if you want to know how these terms are most commonly used, that's what digitization means. So conceptually simple, just turning something into some sort of a computer file. You've digitized it. So what? Does it help to digitize things? Well, not necessarily unless you're going to do something with them. And that's when we get more into digitalization. Now, I'm not going to try to argue why without the AL, the word has one meaning, and with the AL, in other words, digitization versus digitalization, there's no logical reason why one word means one thing and the other word means something else. It's just how the terms are used. So just don't look for, I will discourage you for looking for meaning where you will find none. But digitalization has come to mean using technology to make some kind of a process more computer-centric, app-centric, web-centric, software-centric, device-centric. So, for example, e-commerce is an example of digitalization. You may have allowed people to call you up on the phone and buy products from your catalog, and now they can do it from a computer. That's digitalization. You're doing sort of the same thing, but you're doing it via a digital means, by a means that turns the interaction into ones and zeros. If you go to pay your gas bill online, instead of writing a check, if you take your gas bill and you write a check by hand and you put it in an envelope and you lick a stamp and you put it in the mailbox, you've not done anything digital. You haven't done anything that turns anything into ones and zeros. Now, when the gas company gets your check, they may, who knows, but you haven't. That's an analog process, shall we say. If you take the bill and instead log into a website and type things in and pay that way, that's a digital way of paying your bill. Okay, simple, straightforward. So that's digitalization. For example, if you're running a video rental store, I'm sure many of you are running video rental stores, and instead of somebody handing you the videotape and you writing it in a log, you scan a barcode on the videotape and log into a computer that you have given this person this videotape and it's due on such and such a day. If you go from a handwritten log to a computer program, this is digitalization. And I use that example both to make the point that digitalization has been going on for a long, long time. This is not a new idea. Of course, many companies still have plenty more processes that they should digitalize, but it's not a new idea, digitalization. I haven't heard the term prior to the last few years, so that's true. But as an actual activity, it's nothing new. Okay, so now what is the difference between that, digitalization, and digital transformation? Well, digital transformation, as many of you have heard me say before, is the change of the way your company does business, the way you interact with your customers to align with the needs of today's digital customers and digital world. The world is undergoing a massive transformation where people are shifting the way in which they go about things in profound ways because of digital. And it's not just digitalization. In other words, if I want to call a taxi, a digitalized version of calling a taxi might I don't know, instead of putting my arm out, there's some sort of digital version of putting my arm out, right? And then a taxi would come find me, and et cetera. But if you look at what ride-sharing services have done, it's not just taking the same process and making it digital. It's completely rethinking the whole idea of ground transportation, so much so that the company that runs Uber and the company that runs Lyft, they don't hire drivers. They don't buy vehicles and paint them yellow and drive around looking for people who need a ride. They operate in a totally fundamentally different way. And that is what digital transformation is. So going back to our video rental store example, you can digitalize a video rental store to the teeth. And you could say our video rental store is so completely digitalized that we know every videotape and where it is and who's got it and who's rented it and when it's due back. But that is not digital transformation. That is the same old business model, just run by computers. Digital transformation is what Netflix did. Actually, they did it twice. First, they came up with a model where the DVDs would be sent to your home based on ordering them online, a model that would have been impossible without a digital interface. And that's so typical of digital transformation, that the end result is something that never would have been possible without a digital world. You know, if you pay your bill using an online bill payment capability, which I used earlier as an example of digitalization, you could pay your bill another way. We haven't transformed bill paying. We've just given you another way of doing the same thing. But when Netflix first does DVD by mail, but then creates a streaming service so that you just pick what you want from your TV and watch the videos right in your own home without needing any physical media, without paying to rent something for 3 days, without having to go to the store and return something. I mean, the whole fundamental business has changed. The way you pay has changed. The way they deliver the service has changed. This is an example of digital transformation. And I think that one of the challenges we have today is that in many organizations, they're engaged in activities which are really still digitalization and calling it digital transformation. Now, why does that matter? Well, first of all, digitalization can be a good thing. There's nothing wrong with taking a process that people have to do in an analog way and making it digital. That's a good thing to do in many cases, assuming that that's what your customers want and assuming that it creates more efficiency and cost effectiveness and all kinds of the benefits that you very often see from doing that. So that's good. But the risk is that you keep doing that and you fail to ask the question, if we were to rebuild our business from the ground up right now, if we were restarting it and we were doing it to align with the needs of today's digitally centric customers, how would we make our business work then? So instead of, just allowing the person who's picking up their car at the garage to pay through an app, which is great, but is digitalization, how do I create a completely different idea about parking? Maybe I leave my car wherever I want and you come and you get it. And when I want it back, I push a button on my phone and you bring it to me wherever I am. Why should I have to even find the garage, for example? Completely rethinking what's possible within the domain of your fundamental service. Sometimes people say, oh, companies like Netflix or Amazon or Google, they're tech companies. So of course they're doing something different. Uber, a tech company, doing something different from what a traditional company would do. But those are not tech companies. Oracle is a tech company, right? I'll grant you that. Amazon is a tech company to the degree that they have Amazon Web Services and they have hosting. Okay, that part of their business is a tech company. But the original Amazon business, the retail business that they have, is not a tech company. That is a retailer. Uber is a ground transportation company. Netflix is an entertainment company. It's just that they are transformed versions of those types of companies, or at least an example of one way to transform the delivery of those capabilities in a digitally transformed way for a digitally transformed world. And so the risk of engaging in activities that are really digitalization and calling them digital transformation, the risk is not that you're using a term wrong. I don't care if you use the term wrong. And if you're the guy at your office who goes around saying, that's not really digital transformation, that's digitization, let me send you Howard's video, you're probably not going to be too popular. People aren't going to ask you out to lunch. So you might not want to be the word police. But the risk is that we focus on the stuff that seems safer, that seems more comfortable, because it keeps the basics of our business the same. And it just layers on more e-commerce, more digital touch points, which is beneficial. But you miss the hockey stick opportunity. You miss the opportunity to take your business to a whole other level and to really create a business which is going to be successful in coming decades as your consumers are more and more and more digitally centric, as today's kids, who are the most digitally centric of all different age demographics that we have today, as they become the consumers with the power, they're going to demand not just an app, not just a website and e-commerce. They're going to be looking for brands that really understand their lifestyle and allow them to shop, to work, to play, to date, to meet, to pray, to pay, to do whatever it is that they want to do in a truly transformed way. And so that's the danger. Not that you are using words wrong, but that there's a whole other realm of possibility that you're not thinking about. And whether you call it digital transformation or you call it innovation or whatever the flavor of the month term is going to be next year, because I'm sure there'll be some new terms that come out. The most important thing is that you're taking the time and the space, yes, to continue to operate the business that you're operating now. That's critical. You can't just abandon your current business model and just exclusively focus on the future. At least usually that's not smart business, but you're continuing to do that and continuing to digitalize the parts of your business that need it, but that you also are committing substantial thought and effort to thinking about what is the future customer journey, the future customer experience that might look fundamentally different than the way we offer our products and services today. And you're mapping out that journey. And that is really what digital transformation is all about. So hopefully this has been helpful and interesting and useful, and not just about a dictionary definition, but about thinking of some key distinctions between different activities which offer different levels of potential value, and that you're driving your organization to the one that's going to drive the most value for you. So thanks as always for watching and listening to Winning Digital Customers Livecast. Look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, keep transforming.